Today is November 18th, 2014. We are interviewing Mr. Douglas Babitzke in Hinsdale, Illinois. Mr. Babitzke was born on June 20th, 1925. My name is Cheryl Walker, and I'll be interviewing Mr. Babitzke. Natalie Koska will be the court reporter for this interview. Mr. Babitzke, would you like to start out telling your story?
Okay. Well, the war started and I didn't turn 18 yet. So, but as soon as I turned 18, I was drafted. And I didn't want to, I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to be a fighter pilot, worst way. And when I was, that's why I didn't get a chance to volunteer, because I was still in high school. And I hadn't turned 18 yet. But I turned 18 before I graduated. And to be eligible for flight school and going into the Army, volunteering into the Army as a pilot, to become a pilot, the minimum requirement was a high school graduation, which I was drafted before. So I didn't get a chance to volunteer into that. So when I was drafted, we went to Fort Snelling, Minnesota, and I suggested that I wanted to, for my branch of service, I wanted to get into the pilot training program. And they said, "Sorry, Buster, we have enough pilots, but we are sorely in need of replacements in the infantry. You're in the infantry." So I was sent to Camp Roberts, Camp Roberts, California, from Fort Snelling, Minnesota, for basic training, which was very rigorous. And they gave us training, and I had been in high school, I played football, and I did a lot of hunting. So I was very proficient with the rifle. But anyway, I qualified as far as the expert M1 rifle. Now, the difference in qualifications, they have 3 qualifications: marksman, sharpshooter, and expert. A marksman is from, you have to have a score of 140 to 160. Below that, you're not proficient enough to be in the infantry. Sharpshooter is 160 to 180 score. Expert is 180 to a possible 200. So at any rate, I was a pretty good shot, so before I went into the infantry. So anyway, it was 15, I believe it was 15 weeks of very vigorous training in machine gun, M1 rifle, mortar, bazooka, hand grenade, bayonet, all the kind of training that you needed to be in the infantry. So in the after basic training, they sent us to Fort Ord, where we stayed for about 2 days before we boarded the boat to go overseas. And I'm not superstitious, but we boarded the boat on a Friday the 13th. And interestingly enough, coming back, I boarded the boat a day earlier because I could type. Then the rest of the people who boarded the boat on a Saturday, the 14th, but I boarded the boat to come back on a Friday, the 13th. I thought that was kind of interesting, so I consider that my lucky day. But anyway, we boarded the boat, and I waved goodbye to the Golden Gate Bridge on a Friday the 13th, and we were on a Liberty ship. I believe they were built to normally accommodate about 1,500, this ship, but we had something like 4,500 or 5,000 on the ship. We were packed in there like sardines. And it was so hot and humid in the sleeping quarters that I got out on this 23-day South Sea excursion that I was lucky enough to get. And I slept on the iron deck, which is very much, the temperature was beautiful. But it was a little hard, but it was much more comfortable than in the hold. So on the way over, I got to be a shellback. And if you know what a shellback is, not a lowly pollywog, and kind of unusual for an Army person. Usually it's the Navy that are shellbacks. But since we crossed the equator, all the people on the boat became shellbacks, and eventually after the war, they sent us a great big beautiful certificate telling us that we were shellbacks. Anyway, we were unescorted. That's why we went south of Hawaii to get to the Philippines. And I landed, I believe it was Tacloban Leyte, and I was immediately transferred to Mindanao, where we had a different kind of warfare than they did in Europe. In Europe, they had roads, they had ability to have tanks and support, but in the Mindanao and the Philippines, there was a different kind of warfare. It was kind of search and destroy, jungle warfare, you might call it. In the Philippines, they had it wasn't, I don't think you'd call it a jungle. I think you'd more or less call it a tropical forest. I don't know how much distinction there is there between a forest and a jungle, but the terrain was so dense with these great big trees so close together that you couldn't get a motorcycle or a jeep in there. So the kind of warfare we had was had to be, like I said before, search and destroy. We went on patrols to find the enemy and either capture or you might say the kind of warfare versus support with tanks and artillery, and we couldn't even use the mortars because of the overhanging trees. You couldn't get a mortar shell out, and you couldn't see the enemy either. It was kind of like, you might say, paintballing. You know what paintballing is? Only with live ammunition. So, from the time I landed to the end of the war, we were doing these patrols, which consisted of either say a squad or up to a company level. I don't know how they determined where the enemy was, but apparently they got some kind of intelligence information, maybe from a plane observation or something. Anyway, the time that I spent there was this kind of warfare. We were way in the boondocks, and the food, we didn't have a kitchen or any base camp that had a kitchen or a lot of food. For about 9 months, about the only thing we ever had to eat were these K rations. And if you know what a K ration is, it had a little can about the size of a tuna fish can. You had your dog tags, and there was a little tiny can opener on the chain, which you would use to open the can, which had virtually the only thing that they ever had was either American cheese in this can or some kind of scrambled egg dish, and a couple crackers and either a tropical chocolate or a fruit bar, a small one, enough to fit in one of these little Cracker Jack type boxes. And that's the only thing we survived on for about 9 months. When we'd go on patrol, we'd have to take enough. If it was expected to be about a week's patrol, we'd have to have enough of these boxes along with all the other things that we had to take on the patrol. And there are no toilet facilities or anything else like that. Let's see, what was I going to say? I was going to bring out a point, but I forgot what I was going to say. That's the sign of getting old.
So there were no...
I'm so old that when I was a kid, the Dead Sea was only sick. And afterwards, I've been on the honor flight, and they announced that less than 10%, this was 2 years ago, they announced that less than 10% of World War II veterans are still alive. Half of them were in wheelchairs or in nursing homes. So that would make me an endangered species.
So there were no bathrooms.
No bathrooms, no toilet paper, and mail call. It was so much in the boondocks. Out of in Luzon, the big capital city, they had villages and civilians, and you could go on get fruit or bananas or something like that. But in the center of this forest, there were no coconut trees. They were all on the along the beach. Or the mangoes. They had delicious mangoes, but none in the interior. In fact, there was no kind of fruits or vegetables or anything else. It was just pure K rations. Mail call, that happened very infrequently compared to the larger island or in Europe, or it was virtually daily, I believe, except when they were on, battle or patrol or something. And the what you could write was kind of limited because they censored all the mail. And if you wrote anything about where you were or something about what you were doing, that was blacked out or cut out. Sometimes some of the guys, some of the people at home got a letter that said, "Dear so-and-so," and then everything was cut out and then signed by the but at least they got a letter. They could say, of course, well, I'm still alive, I'm doing fine, I'm not in a hospital, and which is what most people at home were interested in. But you couldn't write about what you were doing or anything else. After the war, most of the guys that were in for the duration, we got discharged on a point system. So the older fellows with a family, kids and family, married people, got extra points plus the points for being overseers. So on my discharge papers it says that I had 20 points. And so I was, the other guys got to go home first. But after the war, I got transferred because the 31st Infantry Division was deactivated, so they had to transfer me to another unit. They transferred me to the 90th Field Hospital, which I didn't think too much of, for the simple reason that everybody there had stripes and something to do. So somebody with a PFC stripe were given all the, you might say, crap details. So I didn't think too much of that.
And where was that at?
What's that?
Where was that?
That was in Mindanao in the Philippines.
Okay.
And so I was trying to think of some way to get transferred to some other outfit. And when very shortly after I got transferred to that outfit, I got my paycheck. And they had taken my combat pay away. So that was the device I used and to go and talk to the chain of command going up to the head of the 90th Field Hospital and complaining that that they took my combat pay away and I wanted to transfer to some other outfit. So,
how much was your combat pay?
The combat, I believe it was a whole $5 more. But that wasn't really the issue. I wanted to get out of there. And so I was able to, I took typing in high school, and I was one of the very few people in the infantry outfit that could type. So they transferred me to the, Battalion Headquarters outfit. So they reinstated my pay, and I got to actually go to the what am I?
You were transferred to the battalion headquarters?
Yeah, I got to do something that I was interested in, and they even sent me to a clerk typist school, and so I also enrolled in a program that they had after the war. There was a physics professor, was going to give a class, and we were supposed to be able to get college credit for. And funny thing, he was a PFC, the same as I was. But he taught this class, but it didn't last very long. I and 2 lieutenants were there, and that was all. And I think we only had 1 or 2 classes, and it was disbanded because I think the lieutenants got transferred or got out of there, so I would have been the only one on the class, and they disbanded that. So I didn't get any college credits. And what do you think I should talk about?
Okay, how long?
That would be interesting.
How long were you at Battalion Headquarters?
I don't remember exactly how long it was, but from the time I got transferred to the time I got sent home. And that's where my MOS changed from combat infantry to different MOS, and they gave me a T5, which is the equivalent of a corporal. So that's on my discharge.
So when you left the Philippines, did you come back to the States and still have service time left?
I wasn't. The service time continued until we went to Washington, Fort Lewis, Washington, where I was discharged, which was, I believe, December 6th, where my service ended. And kind of a funny thing, I grew up in North Dakota, like I said before, and training in football and working on a farm was good training, plus hunting, good training for infantry. And it's the temperatures, it's cold now, but the temperatures in North Dakota get very cold. And the transition from North Dakota to the Philippines, 5 degrees from the equator around Mindanao, was not much of a problem, because as far as the heat is concerned, it probably got as hot in North Dakota as it did in the Philippines, except there was one difference. The amount of rain and humidity along with the heat made a big difference. It got so cold in North Dakota, it gets so cold that in January and February, the jewelers, when they sell a watch, have to put mittens on the hands. It gets so cold that the lawyers have their hands in their own pockets. Anyway, after that, I went to pharmacy school, and I became a pharmacist. And I wanted to be in the Air Corps as a fighter pilot so much that after the war I even took flying lessons. And I got as far as the stalls and the spins and practice landings and things like that, and then it started getting cold, so I quit for the winter. I was going to start again in the spring, but I got married, and that was the end of my flying experiences. But at least I proved that I could have done it.
Let me ask you a few questions. When you were in the Philippines and you were out 21 days on missions or whatever,
it usually doesn't take 21 days. It is usually 4 or 5 days a week, or 10 days or something like that. It usually didn't extend beyond that for each patrol.
Okay, and you came back to your base camp.
There wasn't really a base camp. It was just there were no kitchens, no for a long time. See, this in Mindanao, there were no facilities, no buildings. We slept on the ground under our tent halves. The tent halves were actually what you call a poncho, and two of the ponchos clipped together would make a two-man tent if you had time or to set up a tent. But anyway, we had the uniform, of course. All was your rifle was a constant companion, and helmet was used for so many different things. Could you be used for digging, cooking, but protection from shrapnel and bullets and things like that, and or flying debris. Funny thing about that, after I come back to Burr Ridge, I find that I have to wear my helmet, my metal helmet, to go out in the backyard for protection. In Burr Ridge, you know why? Woodpeckers.
At least you still have it. What medals did you receive? What medals did you receive?
Combat infantry. I have them listed on the combat infantry medal, and a Philippine Liberation Medal, which they don't issue anymore because the Philippines is now a country, not a protectorate. And if I want the Philippine Liberation Medal, which is listed on my discharge, I would have to get it from the Philippine government. So I imagine I do have a one, but it's a replica that I bought. But the original would have to be issued by the Philippine government. So if I went to the Philippine consulate here in Chicago, I imagine I could get one. But if I go to all that trouble, I just have a replica.
What did you get your Bronze Star for?
I didn't do anything. I don't know how many people got the Bronze Star. Combat infantry. Actually, the Bronze Star is the low man on the totem pole as far as awards. The Silver Star and the Congressional Medal of Honor are the real ones. But as far as I'm concerned, there should. This is something that probably everybody in the service, especially those who died in combat, should have got one, at least a Bronze Star. And combat infantry, I imagine there are quite a few people that got the Bronze Star. It isn't as prestigious as the Silver Star or the Congressional Medal of Honor by any means. The Congressional Medal of Honor is something that very few people get.
Is there anything that you would like to add to your interview?
After the fact, I'll probably think of a lot of things. But is there anything that you can think of that I should?
Did you carry anything for good luck?
No, I didn't carry anything for good luck. I wasn't superstitious. The kind of medications that we used, though, I think are kind of interesting. We had to take Atabrin while we were overseas. Malaria was, what would you call it, endemic. So many people had it, and it was so prevalent that we had to take Atabrin, which is a substitute for the quinine. The Japanese had control of all the quinine that was grown, so Atabrin, which is actually a dye, also a dye, had to be taken. And you could tell the people that were overseas for a period of time because their complexion turned more yellowish. Even in some, you could see the yellowish in their eyes. So Atabrin was one of the things that we had to take. We had to take salt tablets because of the lack of, you perspire and lack of sodium. You go into what they used to call heat fag if you don't take a proper amount of salt. And as far as the water supply, there were no way you could get water except for streams, puddles. When we were on patrol, sometimes the water was almost putrid, because you'd have to get it from a sort of a marsh, and you had to put what they call halazone, which is a water purifying tablet in, and you had to let it in there. You were supposed to let it in the canteen. You fill up your canteen, you put your halazone tablet in the canteen, and you're supposed to let it set for a couple minutes or a half hour or so, up to a half an hour before you drank it, so it got dissipated. So those are some of the medications that you had to take. There are so many people that if they didn't take it, they came out with the symptoms of malaria, fever, and chills, and they were sick people. But the Ativan did the same thing that the quinine did. So
did you have bathing facilities over there?
Yeah, sometimes rivers and things like that. No bathrooms, absolutely no bathrooms, latrines, anything else. You lived like the animals, in a sense. No toilet paper, no bathroom facilities or anything else.
When you got home, what was the first shower you took? Did you take a long one?
No, it was after the war was over. Then, of course, that was a different story. Then but during the war, when you were in this combat zone, there were no facilities at all.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Not that I can think of right now. Is there anything that you can think of that World War II?
I think you've covered it all. Tell me what company you were in.
I was in Company G, the 31st Infantry Division, 155th Regiment. That was a combat outfit. Originally National Guard before the war in, I believe it was Aberdeen, Mississippi. And they were activated after the war started, and they were the originals there, and they're the ones that went home first. They had the points, and they were through virtually the entire war.
Well, at this time, I would like to thank you for your service to our country. And I would also like to thank you for allowing me and Natalie to be the ones to hear your story. Okay?
Yeah, actually, it is an entirely different kind of a warfare, jungle warfare, than it was in the mechanized European theater. temperature and the kind of warfare, search and destroy, and so it was entirely different. And as far as the what war is and combat, I don't have to parrot or reiterate a lot of that, because all the movies and things like that, you can see that. But this interview is kind of to show the difference in what different individuals went through and did.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.